Welcome to Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. Coming up on the program this week.
As a man going through something like that, I never spoke about it because I associated any feelings of insecurities about my looks with women.
It's not just about seeing something and thinking something, he's then acting upon it as well. What sort of things were people saying in regard to changing something of themselves?
It was about learning to love who I am and accept who I am. There's nothing wrong with wanting to improve the way that you look, but it's around doing it for yourself rather than other people.
And I'll be reminding you how you can make connections with mental health organisations within your community. It's Mental Health Monday. The home of the UK's conversation about mental health. Thank you for checking out the podcast this week. An absolute pleasure to have you with us. And don't forget, more than 300 episodes now of Mental Health Monday that you can listen to yourself. Listen back to, well, if you want to go all the way back to the start, that's absolutely fine. There's probably a good few months worth of listening. But yeah, absolutely. It's about having conversations about mental health in open and honest ways, and hopefully responsible ways as well. We'll always signpost to services at the end of every single episode, by the way. So although we will talk about various different mental health issues, it's always about looking for help, looking for support. It might well be that you contact the people that we're speaking to as part of the conversation, but you can also head to those services like the Hub of Hope and get local services where you are. There are national services, and I always mention them at the end of each episode. We're going to talk about body image and eating disorders this week, and we're speaking about that off the back of a new global survey, which is looking at how we feel about our bodies. Now, the survey's been conducted across social media through THO and the Global Equality Collective, and it's speaking to people right across the globe about their experiences and their insights, really, into what they think about the way they look and the perceptions about how they should look or how they're meant to feel like they should look. It's a really interesting insight. There's sort of regional breakdowns for this as well. We'll focus on the UK ones as part of this conversation, but a little bit of an insight. 2 out of 5 people said they had a negative body image between the ages of 12 and 30. 35% of men and boys with a negative body image. That's men and boys, not just a female issue. Men aged 21 to 25, the negative body image within that category was closer to 40%. That's really, really high. Within women, 42% of women have a negative body image, the way they feel about themselves. It's nearly half, 47%, when you look at those between the ages of 17 and 20. So this is an issue which isn't just affecting a small minority of people. We can all look in the mirror and feel negative towards ourselves. Now, that's not to say that there's not a normality around wanting to change a little bit about yourself or thinking you need to get into shape, but when does that become a mental health issue? When does that start to play with your self-esteem? When does that start to play with your ability to just conduct everyday life? I think that's one of those really interesting things about those barriers that we cross that don't appear like a line that you can physically see, but you find yourself walking beyond them and not being able to reel yourself potentially back. Somebody who found themselves in that situation is the man from THO himself, Tommy Hatto. Now, Tommy's a really great talker. He's the man who's helped put this whole survey together. And he shared with me his story about body dysmorphia, about eating disorders, and how he found himself in that life. Now, what's really interesting is that Tommy is a model and an actor, a good-looking guy. Well, he can't have any problems, can he? As you'll hear from the conversation, this is all about perceptions, and perceptions not always being what you think they are. There's a wider conversation around this as well about social media and its role, and how young people are taught about social media and the realities of what's going on in social media. So we're going to hear Tommy's story on this week's podcast. It's a really fascinating insight. We'll talk some more about the survey and body image. Your thoughts, of course, more than welcome. My email is in the podcast notes, and you can get in contact via social media. You'll find those links there too. Here's Tommy telling his story.
Yeah, it came from my own personal experience. I think growing up as a kid, navigating teenage life, and I was at school sort of 10 or so years ago. Being a teenager, I think your biggest priority is, trying to be social, get out, party, be in relationships. And I was just kind of navigating that and seeing my friends get into relationships. They were dating girls, and all of the girls that I fancied, it was never reciprocated. I was always rejected. And I was like, oh man, okay, what's wrong with me? And then I would kind of take a look at other people in school and my peers, and I would think, okay, it's the guys that are really sporty. They're the ones that everybody kind of wants to be like. They're the popular guys. They're the ones that the girls seem to be chasing after. And I would go home after school, watch a load of crappy television, high school dramas. And I would see the same thing. I would see it would be like the jocks. They would be the ones who the girls would go after. And I was like, okay, I need to look like these guys. I need to be like these guys. So what is it about these guys on TV and these guys at school that makes them so appealing? And I kind of thought in my head, they look good. They're in good shape. So that's kind of the route I went down. I needed to get in shape. What ultimately happened, I suffer from an eating disorder because I didn't know what it meant to kind of be in shape. And I was just exercising and trying to eat the things I thought were right. And I ended up anorexic. And then kind of navigating that. And as a man, going through something like that, I never spoke about it because I associated any feelings of insecurities about my looks or an eating disorder with women, with females. So I never spoke about it before. And then kind of after school, I kind of got found by an agency, then kind of ended up sort of living in LA, working as an actor, working as a model. And that was a turning point when I really found a lot of education around what it was to be in good shape. And they really helped me in terms of how to look after my body. But what it did was it almost kind of pushed me the other way because now I was making money based on the way that I looked. And then the body image issues just crept up and I was in the gym all the time. I was like eating just the same chicken and rice, chicken and broccoli every single day because I thought I had to look my best to impress other people, for me to make money, for me to meet new people. I was always very self-conscious that if I met somebody, they would think I looked better in the magazines or I looked better on TV. I always say, and people mean it as a compliment, but it triggers me. And I take a bit of offense to it when people say, even to this day, Tommy, you're so photogenic. Because I'm like, wait, I don't look good in real life? I know there's no malice behind that, but that's the thought that comes into my head. And then kind of, I started blogging about it during COVID because kind of the acting world shut down or I wasn't traveling anymore. And when I was posting about it on Instagram and doing some bits on TikTok, I started having other people reach out to me, a lot of young men from all over the world saying, oh man, I feel this way too. And I was like, wow, okay. And I would go onto their pages and I would think, nah, you can't suffer from body image issues. Look at you, you're ripped. And then I was thinking, there are people probably thinking that about me, in the industry that I'm in. People are probably wishing that they looked like me. I'm wishing I looked like somebody else. They're wishing they look like somebody else. So we're in this never-ending vicious cycle of trying to chase perfection. And when I started looking a little bit more into body image, there wasn't extensive research around it online. There's a lot of stuff around mental health. There's a lot of stuff around body image, but mainly targeted towards women. So it's very broad. So I thought, okay, well, we need to just understand what young people are going through today, especially with the rise of social media and, reality television and filtering. We need to understand how young people feel about themselves today. So I kind of worked on this survey. I pitched it to a partner, the Global Quality Collective that I've been working with. They kind of work in the education sector. And we devised this survey that we were going to put out over socials. And, I have quite a large social following. And I thought, okay, my assumption was these social media platforms, Instagram, TikTok, whatever, they could probably, I would guess, be quite damaging because of the content that you would see on there. So let's put out the survey on those platforms. Let's target the people who are going on there, who are potentially influenced or impressionable by these social platforms, and see what bite we get. And we had an amazing response. We had over 1,100 responses from young people aged 12 to 30 years old from all over the world, 63 countries. It was just incredible.
We'll come on to the results of the survey because I think there's plenty in there. Let me just touch on that, because I think there's part of that story which might raise a few eyebrows, that when you looked at other people and you thought, oh, I need to be ripped, I need to be, like the jock, that it wasn't about what you look like. There's more into it about how you maybe felt about yourself. And I wonder if that's the point where you suddenly realize, although we're talking about body image, the physicality, we're actually talking about something within our mental health space.
Yeah, it all comes down to self-worth. And growing up, I didn't have a lot of self-worth. I think, I always compared myself to other people, which I think we're all guilty of at some point in our lives. And body image issues, this isn't just something that affects young people. We did the survey for young people, but I've spoken to many different organizations, schools. Every single person on this planet would have some point in their life thought, ugh, wish I could change that, or, I wish I didn't have that. So it's something that's universal. It doesn't show any bias towards any different type of person. But no, you're right. It was about learning, as cheesy as it sounds, it was about learning to love who I am and accept who I am. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to improve the way that you look. I never want to say, don't improve the way that you look because you're pushing out some sort of hidden toxic agenda. That's not the case at all. But it's around doing it for yourself rather than other people. It's around having the self-validation rather than the validation of others, which is what I spent many, many years seeking. Is when I started to lose weight and go into the fitness, a lot of people were complimenting me. And I loved that buzz. And that's ultimately what pushed me into an eating disorder. Then that's ultimately what pushed me into having muscle dysmorphia, because people were saying, man, you look good. And I thought, okay, I'll push the boat even more. I'll go even further. But now I've got to a point where I want to look good, but I want to do it for myself. And I want to be in a place where I don't only just look after the way that I look, but I feel good for it. And to me, that's the biggest priority and the biggest lesson I want people to understand. Don't be influenced by what you think you need to look like. Be at a place where you're content with what you look like.
I think that's a really interesting idea, that actually, although we're talking about body image, this idea that you've got to look internally and find something of yourself internally. Is it a big step to suddenly decide that actually the answer isn't in the mirror? Like that the answer doesn't involve looking at the mirror, doesn't involve thinking about your physical appearance?
It's a tough one because society is geared up. You look around, society is very aesthetically driven. We take a look at things and we enjoy and we consume things because they look good. It's the same for a lot of content you see, products. It's the same for people. I think when you look at a lot of reality TV shows, some of the most popular ones are popular because the people look good and we want to consume that type of content. So it's always hard to kind of differentiate. I think it gets to a place where you look in the mirror and, when you see yourself in the mirror, that you not only just see yourself as an image, but you see the person behind that too, that you think, it's all encompassing. Okay. It's around what values do I have? How do I lead my life? What is my purpose? What are my intentions in life? But also, what is the wrapper around all of those values?
It strikes me, and I'm not a what's the phrase for this one? An evolutionary psychologist, but I would imagine that there is an element of being the most fit, being the most athletic, which is born out of, as a species, sort of the who gets the chance to sort of to mate, to procreate, and to become the sort of dominant within a tribe or whatever, and that could play out across the whole sort of animal kingdom. But I think there's a very human thing, and it's touched on within the survey, and that's about the sort of the toxicity that comes around things like, we used to say beauty magazines, we now say social media, and social media's come up as a big factor that beyond those sort of like, should we say, Neanderthal desires that people have potentially, there's this other thing that's going on, this sort of continuous reinforcement of what is beautiful, and then the algorithms that say, yeah, and it's not you, because look at more of these people and look at more of these people, and that's the element which takes us beyond something as simple as life on Earth, if you like.
Yeah, it is, and I think we naively, innocently go on social media and we click like or we view a picture. And then, like you said, the algorithm will feed us more and more and more of the same type of content. And unconsciously, we start to filter that in our brains to think this is how real life is. This is how real people around the world look. And we all know that what we see on social media is just a highlight reel. We all know that it can be manipulated. But it's so hard when you're in it, when you're on the app, to remember that, because you're just seeing these people live their best life. They look great. And you're like, man, this is like the average person, I suppose you would see more, and I think it's a tough one, because there seems to be this narrative that the way that you look equals success. You see it on television with shows like The Apprentice. If you started watching The Apprentice way back when it started, and then kind of compare it to the candidates that they have now, you can start to see that the type of people that they now recruit, they look good. They look like models. And then you go on to Instagram or TikTok, and the types of people who sort of blow up in terms of influencing, they look good too. And they make a ton of money from it. And there is this narrative that if you look good, then you're more likely to be a success. I mean, I speak to a lot of corporates, and if you were to type successful businessman or successful businesswoman into Google Images, what you would get is presented with a load of stock photos of very attractive young people. So then again, and that's where potentially somebody who doesn't look like that moving into the corporate world would think, well, I'm not going to climb up the ladder because I don't look like what we deem successful.
Although I would also say that if you looked at then the reality of the top 100 CEOs in the country, there'd be some, there'd be all sorts.
Exactly.
Mainly white, bearded, middle-aged guys, many of whom probably wouldn't be doing, underwear commercials, but then probably had no intention of ever doing underwear commercials. There was a line in the thing which it cut me. It cut me deep. This as a line that young people have got this attitude, but as a line, it strikes me as something that really cuts through to what you've said. Attractiveness determines profitability. Now, goodness me, what a terrible message, what a terrible legacy we are leaving to young people if that is the thing that we've taught them about social media, that attractiveness determines profitability. Goodness me, that hurt, I think, when I read that, Tommy.
It's deep. It's really, and like I said, you could, you post some nice photos of you, perhaps filtered, manipulated photos of you on Instagram. You could earn, what somebody goes, perhaps in a manager director level, what they earn in a month, you could earn from just one post. And that's where that narrative can become very damaging to people looking at that.
Let's break down into some of the figures, and there's a whole global breakdown of this one, and we'll put a link to the report so people can sort of see how things break down across the globe. We'll come on to that. Let's talk about the UK figures, though. Only 10% of people who responded from the UK have a positive body image. 2 in 3 had tried to change something of themselves because of pressures that we felt. I think that's a telling thing as well, isn't it, Tommy? That it's not just about seeing something and thinking something, it's then acting upon it as well. What sort of things were people saying in regard to changing something of themselves?
Yeah, we had, and I think it's really kind of imperative just to make the fact that changing something about yourself is not a bad thing. So we had a lot of people saying that they were going to the gym from what they had seen in social media. They were eating better, they were trying to lose weight, which is a great thing. But then we had on the other side of that, we had people who felt as though they had to get cosmetic surgery. So they had to go and get Botox, they had to go and get lip fillers. They had to sort of starve themselves or neglect themselves of food. And I think that's where it comes back to what I said before, is who are you doing this for? Or, and that can be the damaging thing if you're doing it because you feel pressured that the beauty standards are for women, you must have big lips, you must sort of be curvy, you must have a small waist, you must be tanned. And for men, you must be ripped, you must have muscles, you must be tall. We had sort of kids from the UK as young as like 14 saying that, they wanted to consider getting a boob job, or they wanted to, kind of get plastic surgery and things like that, because they felt from the imagery that was shown to them in celebrity and media and social media that that's what it took to be beautiful.
There are plenty of body positivity sort of campaigns that are out there. It was interesting, though, that in the survey that it was sort of suggested that for all the positivity around those sorts of campaigns, it didn't, or it was outweighed by that sort of constant, Instagramming, TikToking, Facebook, I'll mention them all in case I get into trouble, Xing, as I think we could call it now, those things were outweighing. And I think that shows us that social media appears to be the real big player in some of the negativity, in a way that we used to talk about probably beauty magazines.
Yeah, and I think it becomes, I think when we look at when beauty magazines came around, there was almost a particular cohort of people that you would find in those magazines, and that would be celebrities, I guess. I think maybe back then, celebrities were sort of far removed from the general public, but now with social media, is you can view anybody anywhere in the world. They don't have to be a celebrity, but when you're starting to see imagery of people who look good and they're just like the regular Joe, I think that's when it hits a little bit more harder, because you're like, wow, okay, it wasn't just a celebrity who could achieve a great body now or look amazing. It can be anybody. It could be me, and maybe that's how I feel as I should work towards.
There's a couple of lines in the report about education around this. I just wanted to tell you a quick anecdote, because I've got a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, and there was a great moment. We were in Norfolk during the summer, and we went on a day trip to Norwich Cathedral, which is a lovely day trip out. There was a guy who was stood in the car park with a tripod and his phone mounted on a camera, and he was very, very sharply dressed, like he'd gone dressed like to pose for some photos. He was on his own, and he kept taking a photo that he would walk around, look at the picture, and he was doing that whole sort of like throwing his jacket over his shoulder, looking across, obviously having the photo, walking back around, checking the photo. And he was obviously trying to create that image with this big Gothic cathedral in the background, looking great. He looked sharp, fantastic. But I pointed it out to my kids and say, look, this is what those photos are. That although that guy might look great in that photo, look at him. He's stood in a car park. He's on his own. There's actually that I'm 41. So to me, there was a bit of a tragedy. I was like, mate, do you want me to take a photo of you, like laughing or something? I wanted to sort of say that too, but of course I didn't say that. But I wanted to say to them, look, that's why you can't believe things that you see. And I've subsequently actually looked on Instagram to see if I could see the picture of it. He tagged the thing in, and I couldn't, because I wanted to get a sense of maybe, did he get what he wanted from that? Did he go away and then did people, oh wow, you look like you had a great time? And did he go, oh actually I was on my own for an hour and a half just trying to get that one photo? And I think from an education point of view, I was really pleased my kids could see that, not to to talk this guy down, but just to see the reality of what the supposed realism of it was.
Yeah, and I think it is about that education, Mick. I always try to be transparent to say when I'm doing photo shoots, way back when, not only did it go through the Photoshop process, but actually, I was working out a couple of weeks before that photo shoot. On the day of the photo shoot, I wouldn't drink any water and just eat really salty foods to kind of take all of that water retention away, so I looked as cut as possible. Other times they would literally draw abs onto me with makeup. So, I try to talk around this, not to say this is what you need to do to make your photos better, but actually, to your point, this is the reality of what that photo you see is and everything that's gone behind it.
Yeah, this idea that we get the opportunity to peek behind the camera. I think when certain, I'll call them influencers, people on social media, when they do that and they'll do that, this is what I look like, and they kind of like stretched out in their bikini, and then it's them. And then this is what I look like when I was eating a burger, and they're sitting forward. And of course, you get a little roll that comes out, because that's just what all bodies do. And they sort of show those two images and say, this is the same body. But one has this aspiration, and one is, oh, look at the state of you. But actually, when you see them together, you go, oh, actually, yeah, there's a normality to that. And it is just the trick of the camera, or the style of the pose, or the photoshopping that comes afterwards.
Yeah, and again, what the survey really brought out, which I was hoping that would bring out, is that there actually isn't one definition of beauty. I think again, to your point, the algorithm feeds us what we want, what is sort of posed onto us. But what we found is that in the UK and the US, beauty standards were similar. It was sort of, gym fit, tanned, looking good. But when you compared that to a lot of the countries and respondees we had from Asia, that was the complete opposite. They didn't want to be tan. They wanted to be paler. They wanted to be skinnier. Their idea of beauty was more sort of K-pop type looking people. And then we had respondees in Africa who said, actually, the bigger you are is what is considered more beautiful. And then we had countries, sort of other areas in South Asia where it wasn't more determined on the looks, but it was determined on the clothes that you wear, the jewelry that you had. So what the survey does and the report shows is that there isn't one universal definition of beauty. I think I'm guilty of it. We get caught up in our Western bubble, I guess, of what we think we need to be and look like. But actually, the world is much bigger, and that isn't what the world deems as beautiful.
Yeah, you almost need to sort of detoxify some of those aspects, do you? So you can see different people and go, oh, they've got pale skin, they've got dark skin, they're tan, they're not, they're muscly, they're not. And actually, you almost want to have that ability to see, well, in that culture, that looks great, in that culture. But you have to teach that, don't you? People have to understand that, it's the old-fashioned, Queen Victoria, the first one, was very, very pale. And that was a sign that she was clean. But in reality, she had all this sort of makeup on, so she didn't look like the dirty-looking people who had, pockmarked skin or charcoal skin or whatever it was that was the issues of the day. No, I think that's absolutely huge. In terms of the stats, just to sort of wrap this up, Tommy, 40% of men aged 21 to 25 had negative body image. 47% of women 17 to 20. Those are crucial ages, aren't they, in terms of when you sort of get your adult body, if you like. It's beyond the thing that you sort of developed into. It's when you sort of look at yourself. Can we grow away from that? Is there a focus that we can have on those sort of crucial ages so that when people are potentially at their most vulnerable, that society has a way of responding to that? Because it strikes me that those are really high numbers. You're looking at half of people who have a negative body image, but they're all people who will be getting their first job, picking their university, choosing their careers. They're all making crucial decisions while at the same time looking at themselves in the mirror potentially and thinking, this isn't working for me.
Yeah, and it's the same when I was at school. You're navigating all the other challenges of teenage life, and then you have this on top of you, thinking, well, do I fit in? And I think just it's a tough one because, like you're right, those are the ages where we're really understanding in who we are in our identity and what can be done. I would say in educational facilities, schools, universities, colleges, workplaces as well. It's just around representation. I think it's building good cultures which, support people and create open, safe spaces for people to really be transparent about how they feel. I always say to businesses, it's not just around creating internal cultures and saying, openly talking around body image. I think in all of those establishments, you have to build your brand as well. I think you have to look at your marketing. If you're using stock images of, again, as I said, successful business people, but you're trying to promote internally a good body image positivity, there's a disconnect there, So it's around not just trying to create that culture, but actually look at your branding. Look at the social events that you hold. If you're holding social events which only focus on eating all the time, how does that play on someone's mind who potentially is going through an eating disorder, or they're feeling conscious about eating out all the time? So it's around just trying to think a little bit more outside the box rather than just let's have a conversation around it.
Absolutely. The full report available from the Global Equality Collective as well as THO as well. Tommy, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you speaking to us today. Thanks for joining us on Mental Health Monday.
Oh, thank you so much.
I hope you've enjoyed this week's podcast. Thanks for checking out Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. You can find me on Twitter at Mr. Mick Coyle. You can also find me, Mick Coyle, on Facebook as well. Don't forget, if you want to speak to somebody about your mental health, you can do so. The Samaritans, free to call on 116 123. You can find mental health services where you are. Just look for the Hub of Hope. Type in your postcode. It'll find those mental health services close to you. And for support in a crisis, you can text SHOUT to 852 85258. That's if you're experiencing a personal crisis, you're unable to cope and need support. Shout to 85258. That's a text line. Do get involved in those services. In an absolute emergency, always remember the number to call is 999. Thanks for downloading the podcast this week. We'll be back next week with more Mental Health Monday.